Welcome to People Unplugged, the podcast from the creative team at People Unboxed. I'm Westy, Digital Director at People Unboxed. This is the People Unplugged podcast. Hi, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. It's great to be back after a short summer break. I know there was lots of talk on social about where we'd gone, and the truth is we've been really busy over the summer, which is great, but it's also great to be back. And this month, I'm joined by someone I've been looking forward to talking to for a long, long time, and that's Ruth McFarlane from Doing What Really Matters. And we're going to introduce you to Ruth in just a second. So rather than me butchering my way through that, firstly, I want to say, Ruth, how are you?
Hello, Westy. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Nice to be with you.
Fantastic. Thanks for giving up your time again. I'd love to start by learning a bit about you, finding out what it is you do, and I guess in a way how you got into the line of work that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, it was never something I'd really particularly intended. I trained as a teacher way back in the day, and I taught for a while in mainstream education in the UK and in Hong Kong for a bit. And then when I came back to England, I sort of got into the corporate world, really, but still in the training sphere. So I was working in the gas and electricity industry, but still doing staff training. And after a while, that just didn't have quite enough interest for me, I suppose. So I went back into not mainstream education. I've always kind of supported people who don't fit the boxes of mainstream education. So I did some peace education work, peer mediation training. I taught in prisons and secure children's homes for a few years. And then I worked at the Open University running their prison education team. And after I left there, Dan, who's my business partner, he's the DW part of the DWRM. I've known him for about 10 years now, and he contacted me and said, I've got this idea for a business. So together we set up the social enterprise that is Doing What Really Matters.
Fantastic. We'll dig into that in just a minute and what it specifically is you do, because they've got dozens of questions about it. Before we do that, just picking up on a couple of things you said there. So how do you have to adapt your teaching and supporting strategy to accommodate those different challenges? So is it very different? I'm assuming the answer is going to be yes, but maybe I shouldn't make that assumption. Is it very different working with students in a prison environment versus any other environment you've worked in?
I mean, yes and no, really. So it's with any teaching, it's about relationships and engagement, isn't it? And it's about finding what makes people tick and what motivates them, and also being able to be a good communicator. So I think just in prisons especially, it's recognizing that for a lot of people in prison, school was a really unhappy place or a really unsuccessful place for them. And so they tend to come in with quite a negative view of themselves and a really kind of critical view about their own abilities. And I used to teach maths, and so of course often there's people have a really strong reaction to maths. Oh, I hate maths. Oh, I can't do it.
Yep.
But actually we used to do all sorts of really interesting projects which were kind of based in the environment they were living in. So, like, for example, we the prison had built one of those kind of outdoor gym things like you see in the parks and everything, and it was right slap bang in the middle of the courtyard. So and this was young people I was working with. They were all really curious, partly about how much did it cost and also about how much people were going to use it. So we ended up doing this whole project looking at how much it would have cost and breaking it down for cost of the equipment, cost of the labour, cost of the design and insurance and all that sort of thing. And then we started exploring, well, how often were people going to use it? And that depended a little bit on the regime, when were they allowed to, but also on their, would they be embarrassed to use it or would they be showing off? And would the boys be more likely to use it than the girls? So we ended up doing this whole great thing, which included, money and probabilities and all sorts of other stuff. And they got really into it because they felt like they had a voice, and they ended up writing a whole little report on it. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying you need to find the hook that interests people.
No, absolutely. So let's take it back a step then. So obviously we've talked there about educating people in prison and stuff. So what exactly is it that you do, and what do you do with prisoners, if you like, and educating prisoners, and then how do you then work with those ex-offenders? I've said that word, but there you go. It's on a plate for you.
I fed it to you. I'm going to challenge you. So I'm going to start with that word. So I always will challenge that terminology. We really try to use people-centered, inclusive terminology. So I would talk about people leaving prison or people with a conviction, but always people first. And my issue with that term ex-offender is, when do you ever stop being an ex-offender? What's
Yes.
the cutoff, and
Yep.
also for people to constantly be labelled by the thing that they've done wrong is really damaging. So I always try, and this is partly why people we work with enjoy being known as students, because they feel it gives them a status, whereas ex-offender just marks you out already and almost kind of foretells a path that you're expected to go on. So my organisation now, we're a social enterprise, and we partner with universities. We aim to increase opportunities for people in prison to study at further and higher education levels. So currently in prisons, there are education providers contracted by the government, but they are only contracted to provide level 1 and 2 maths, English, basic IT, and ESOL, so English for speakers of other languages. And people tend to go, and it's sort of functional skills type stuff,
Yep.
and people tend to go round in circles a little bit without any progression or sort of aspirational opportunities. And now, we know that lots of people in prison have had bad experiences at school, been excluded, been in care, neurodiverse, all sorts of reasons why they might not have done well in education. But that really belies an intellect. And so Dan, my business partner, is a classic example of this. He was excluded from school when he was 13. He was on the road, as they call it, so I'm not going to go in. I never really discuss details about people's background, but suffice to say, he served a long prison sentence. But during that time, he actually realised that, education was like almost a form of rebellion. They didn't want him to do it, and that made him want to do it. So he did the equivalent of his GCSEs and A-levels. He did his degree, did his master's. He's now doing his PhD. And this is someone who was excluded from school when he was 13. And there's lots of people like that, maybe not to PhD level, but who can certainly be studying and be enjoying studying. And what that does is, so firstly, it helps people to reflect on themselves, their own background, their social context, their own abilities, their own identity. And then also it helps to give people a kind of a higher aspiration about what they can do when they leave. So one of our goals is that we have this stream of articulate, educated people who can be contributing to research and policy reform for the criminal justice system. There's no denying that our criminal justice system is in quite a mess. And a lot of the people who are best placed to suggest improvements to that are the people who have direct personal experience of it. So I see my role as being an enabler and a sort of, stepping stone for people, so that we have students who are studying, and they're studying remotely. So we offer a kind of a wraparound support for that. And then the idea is that we're also finding opportunities for them to have their voice heard.
So when you say, so do you actually go into prisons and physically deliver sessions yourself?
So yeah, our organisation, I tend to focus on the university side, and Dan and then other people in our team who all have direct personal experience of prison, they're the ones who are really relatable. And so they are going into prisons to recruit students, to offer the support to students. The actual teaching is on a distance learning basis. That's right. what we offer. So we've currently got about 300 students across 40 different prisons. But we know that that's quite isolating. It's quite lonely studying by yourself. So we have a few different ways. For example, we have a free phone number so that students can call us for study skills support, questions about when's my assignment due. That also enables us to have drop-in times so that they can speak directly to their tutor. So for example, Wednesdays 1 till 3 will be the history drop-in time, and you can phone and speak directly to your history tutor. And then increasingly, our partner universities are working with the prison that's local to them to be offering seminar sessions and talks and things to just engage people, help to raise the profile of studying in the prison, and help people to enjoy that student identity.
And what challenges do you face in motivating a student or a group of students to sort of stick with it? Is there a high drop off rate? And in my head, and again, this is why I'm having this conversation with you. You're the expert. I'm clearly not. Is it almost getting over that stigma of it's not cool to be being educated, or is that not actually a stumbling block at all?
I mean, there is a little bit of that, perhaps more so in some of the younger people, but actually, this is why we have really targeted recruitment. That our team who are going into the prisons are, the coolest guys you can imagine. Like Dan was describing yesterday how he went into Belmarsh wearing his Jordan 4 wet cement trainers. Means nothing to me. The guys on the landings are seeing him and going, oh, so that's like his way of kind of attracting attention. But then also once he starts to tell his story and he says, look, I was there, I was you. Now here I am here. Here's a different option. And same with, our other team. For example, we've got a lovely woman called Lauren who also spent a bit of time in prison. And when she goes in and speaks to people, she can describe it and say, look, I understand exactly what it's like to be here. Here's why I think you should give education a try. And one of the things that we do is try and give people some sort of safe ways to get started without a massive commitment. So we have some funded opportunities for modules at level 3, like sort of equivalent to A level, so that people can just give it a try. They don't have to pay anything because we've got grant funding in to cover that. And they can just try it out and see if it's for them. And if it's not, then that's fine. Then they've tried it. But most people go, I really like this. Have you got anything else I can do? And so, then that sort of starts that way of thinking and that engagement.
And do you have a cohort that works within a prison? I live in Bedford, for example, so Bedford Prison's literally about 10 minutes up the road. Yeah. So would there be a cohort in Bedford Prison, or would there be, is it more of, you said about maths, for example, so if you're teaching maths, do you teach that to a number of different prisons? Because obviously they'll join online. Is there, how does that work?
Okay, yeah. So for the level 1 and 2 education that's happening in the prisons, that's delivered by the education providers, then yes, they will have a cohort who are receiving face-to-face teaching. The way we work is slightly different because people are working individually. And also they're not online. People in prison are not allowed internet access because of security concerns. So we have a few different solutions to that. The simple one is that we send in printed packs and textbooks and DVDs so that they can watch pre-recorded lectures. But
God, that's real old school distance learning really in my world. I mean, wow.
Learning, absolutely. And in fact, just this week, my colleague was here and we were parceling up great boxes of textbooks and printed packs to send in to the students. A neater solution is we have a partnership with Coracle Inside, who are a company based in Cambridge, who've developed a secure Chromebook, which has been approved by HMPPS, and it operates offline, but they have a virtual learning environment, and we are able to upload study content onto their VLE, and then each individual student will be assigned their secure Chromebook, and the content will be downloaded onto that device. So it's not connected to the internet, but it does replicate much more of a digital study solution. So it's brilliant. Students love it. It's Coracle have had a phenomenal rise over the last few years, but they're still there's about 3,000 devices currently in prisons. And there's, prison population of 88,000 people at the moment. So they don't stretch very far. There's a lot of demand for them. But it's good because it meets all the security requirements. And, there were concerns about would they be misused or damaged or whatever. And really over the time that Coracle have been running, there's been very few problems with those devices, because students absolutely sort of treasure them and hang on to them because they value them so much.
Sure, yeah, and it'd be really interesting to see. Obviously, my background is digital learning and anything technology based, to be honest. And it'd be really interesting to see how you think that could expand going forward. Are we talking about, interactive headsets? We're talking about, VR and all of that sort of stuff. So it'd be really interesting to see how technology can enhance the learning experience for, can I say incarcerated students? Is that a phrase I can use?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a really good question, actually, because there's been a few projects. One which was looking at an augmented reality type scenario, which was helping people prepare for release. One of the problems for people who've been in prison for a long time is that they come out of prison not knowing how all, the digital stuff is involved.
Yeah.
Even like contactless payments. How do you pay for your ticket on the tube? And, how do you do your banking? How do you apply for stuff? So that digital divide is a huge problem. We've got loads of ideas on this. In fact, we're currently involved in a really interesting project with 42 London, who are an education organisation, looking at how we can use AI to improve our business efficiencies. And the project that we've chosen to work on is looking at how do we extract study materials from the university VLE to put them into an offline format that will replicate the online experience. So we're working on that at the moment, and I just think that has huge scope. There's so much that we can incorporate. For example, what I hope is going to be fairly simple things like whenever there's a hyperlink, the AI program can summarize, the contents from that hyperlink, because obviously the students in prison wouldn't be able to click on.
Be able to go onto the link. Yeah, sure.
So that's some of the simple stuff, but then there's also some more complex stuff where we're hoping that we can look at replicating forum discussions and group work and things through a large language learning model. I'm talking as if I know what I'm talking.
It sounds convincing to me.
I have these ideas, and then luckily I have a team of developers who are going to help me to work on it all. But
best way to be, absolutely.
It's really exciting, and what it does is recognises the security concerns of the prison system. We're not trying to challenge that. We're just saying, let's look at ways that we can improve digital study and digital experiences so that when people come out, they're not quite so sort of in the dark ages.
Sure. Give me an idea of the sort of the range of topics and a range of courses that you offer.
Yeah, so business is one of our most popular ones. A lot of people are really interested in being self-employed when they leave prison for sort of fairly obvious reasons, I suppose. A lot of people are really interested in criminology and sociology. They want to kind of understand the context of their own backgrounds and lives.
Sure.
Then loads of people are interested in sport and exercise and, training. So we've got a particularly good module at the moment, which is access to health. So it's a level 3 module, but it sort of sets people off ready for any of those sort of sport, healthcare related topics. Psychology, I suppose, links into social sciences. I mean, really, people. I had an inquiry last week about architecture, and I said, I don't know if we can support that, but let's look at what you might need to develop.
Sure.
What's on the pathway. I really try to never say no. If people are interested, I always try to find something that's even vaguely connected so that they can be working towards an end goal.
And how do you... I'm not going to apologise for my ridiculous questions, because this is why you're here, because you're the expert and I'm not. Oh, well, I'll be the judge of that. How does this help? I was watching Parole the other day. I don't know if you've seen. I'm sure for people listening in the UK at the moment, there's a program called Parole, which is about basically behind the scenes, looking at how the parole service works. How do you think this education program helps the rehabilitation of some of these prisoners?
Oh, massively. I mean, just in terms of raw statistics, there's all sorts of different measures about reoffending rates, and it sort of depends largely on age and length of sentence. But in excess of 50% of people might go back to prison within a year of leaving. There's a real revolving door, and it really contributes to the massive prison population we have at the moment. The numbers for people who've engaged with higher levels of study, the number is more like 6%. And this is backed up with figures from the US, where they have a really strong college and prison program. And from other countries, we work with organizations in lots of different countries. So that's the first thing, is that it just giving people a different sense of identity, a greater optimism, more opportunity. When people leave prison, this is a bit of a cliche, but the three things they need are somewhere to live, something to do, and someone to love. Now, the somewhere to live is the most crucial. If you think about that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everybody just needs,
pretty low, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. There's level one.
That bit sorted, and that is a problem. But if you can, if you can get that in place, or if you can, even better, have a job to go to when you come out, then you can find somewhere to live. If you've got family support, somewhere to live, so that triangle is really important. And the something to do bit is crucial, because most people don't want to be in prison. For a very few people, it's the kind of better option, but for most people, it's really rubbish. And I was talking to a young man recently who he was quite open about the fact that he'd been dealing drugs and that was all he knew. And he was just saying, I don't even want to be a criminal anymore. I want to do something good, and he was really hungry for it. And in fact, he told this brilliant story. I'm just gonna completely paraphrase him, but it's a lovely story. While he was in prison, someone told him a joke about, if you want to hide something from a black man, you put it in a book. And he was really offended, and his reaction was to,
I'll show you. Yeah.
But then he said he did a step back and realised he'd never read a book. So we went, So he said he went to the library. Prisons do have libraries, and he got a book about Biggie and Tupac, and he thought he knew everything there was to know about them. And it turned out that, he said, there was so much in there. I had loads I didn't know. So then he got a book about JFK, read that, loves a conspiracy theory, and then he just carried on. And now he's read 250 books and he's doing his degree, all coming out of that thing of him saying, I don't even want to be a criminal anymore. And then somebody causing him offense with a joke. I think it's that change of mindset. It's helping people to think of themselves in a different way and to recognize other opportunities that they might have, and then to make sure those opportunities are there, which again is where we come in, really.
And what does the journey look like for that person? So we use them as an example, and you're saying that they've done their degree, and when they get released, and and you're right, let's hope they've got somewhere to live. And do we continue to support them, or do you continue to support them, or is your job with them done, so to speak?
Yeah. So we absolutely help people on through the gate, we call it. That's the expression in the justice system. So we will help with some of the practical things, like, have they got their driving license and ID and all of that, bank account and stuff. We'll also help them with writing a really good CV, recognising what they've done while they've been in prison, preparing a disclosure statement if they need to disclose their convictions, preparing for interviews, but also helping them to find the right opportunities. So, we're linked in with lots of networks. Lots of people who've been in prison want to work to help other people not go to prison. So they're really interested in the whole third sector group. So we're part of a lot of networks, such as Clinks or Criminal Justice Alliance, where organisations like ours will advertise their vacancies. And, we also employ people with this experience. We prioritise people with lived experience of prison as our speakers and delivering our workshops and our trainers and so on. So when people come out of prison, it's very individual. It depends what it is they're wanting to do. So sometimes they might want to continue studying, in which case we'll support with those applications. Sometimes they want to set up their own business, so we might find them support for being self-employed. Sometimes they want to do a bit more vocational training. Or sometimes they might want to just find a job, and we support our students who are coming through the process. That conversation starts, from years before they come out, because we know them, and we're having those conversations regularly.
And because you've got to know them, if I can put you on the spot here, but how frustrating is it when you do know that person, you do know how they've, in quotes, changed, or what how they are now, and there's still that stigma around, but you're, well, the ex-offender word, exactly that, and therefore we can't really take that risk. How do you manage that? Because that must be really frustrating for someone like yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's about having really honest conversations. I'm not going to put somebody with a problematic conviction for sex offences forward for a job that's working with children.
Right.
So, that's a really coarse example, but it's about understanding. So it's about having quite open conversations with people about what their licence conditions say, what restrictions they might have. It's up to the probation officer to do a risk assessment. That's not my role. I'm not a professional in that regard. But, the individual student will be telling us, my probation officer says I can do this or I can't do that. So that's all part of the conversation. And then we'll look at, what jobs are available in that area, and we'll help people with their application. And often we'll do quite a lot of advocacy for them. So, for example, recently we had someone who was applying for a job with a water company. He did really well, got right through all the assessment stages and everything, managed his disclosure really well. And then right at the last minute, it turned out that they had changed the requirements for the job, and it would require him to be going into customers' homes. And he himself said, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So we then went and had a conversation. He was anxious about having that conversation. So we had that conversation on his behalf. The company agreed, but because they really like him, they're now looking for another opportunity because he did so well in the interview process. So, there is some advocacy needed here, and that's our role. And we talk about creating cultures of acceptance, about recognizing that, there's a big old scale here of,
Sure.
It's not about denying that harm has been caused. It's about preventing it from happening again. And the best way to prevent that from happening again is to make sure that people have opportunities to, to work and thrive in society.
And do you find that, trying to think of an example, in fact, when I knew I was going to chat to you, I was chatting to my wife last night. I said, and she said, well, you should ask her this, and you should ask her. We always get that, which is lovely. So I don't know why I don't just bring her on and we can have the same conversation. But one of the examples that came, and she's an HR manager, so she employs a lot of people. She gets a lot of people come through, and she was saying, it's not that they have people that have been to prison sort of come and working for them, and she said, but even then, you almost, it's their business. It's a spent conviction. It's done. They're, to your point, there's no risk because the line of work they're in. She said, but you then, people are, oh, that's really admirable. I wouldn't want them working for me though. It really blows her mind. She said, but you can't have it both ways. I find that really frustrating. And ironically, the conversation came up about I'm a big football fan. And there's been a couple of relatively high-profile cases where this allegation has been made, and it's gone through the courts, and they're either they've done their time, and now they're back out again, or nothing was ever proven. They've never been convicted of anything. And yet, when I talk to friends at the pub, they're like, yeah, but I still wouldn't want them playing for us. And you think, I can't understand. I can understand it, but I don't know how you overcome that stigma.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question and quite a common feeling. And one of the things I would say is that, there's something like 11 million people in this country, it might even be higher, I should go and check on the Unlock website, who have a conviction. And of course, those convictions range for all levels of seriousness.
And so, Ruth, before we continue, how long does someone have to disclose their conviction on their CV?
Okay, so it's a little bit complicated. There's various rules about when your conviction is spent and how long it is unspent for. So if you have an unspent conviction, you're meant to disclose that in certain, cases of employment.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the rules they depend on how long your sentence was,
right.
and
Bit of a
whether
grey
you've
area
had
then.
multiple
Okay.
sentences or not. So I don't want to give a trite answer which gives something incorrect, but Unlock have a really good website which explains all of this if people are interested. So I suppose, there does tend to be quite a judgmental attitude in society about people with convictions, and sometimes it's about sort of, so this is where sometimes the disclosure can be good, because Dan, my business partner, he never shies away from talking about his own background, but often he likes people to get to know him a bit, and then they go, I can't believe you did that, because you're just such a nice person. Yeah, guess what? So there's also something about recognizing that, like I said earlier with that term ex-offender, people shouldn't always be defined by the one bad thing they've done. Lots of things have gone wrong in my life. Lots of times when I've behaved in ways that I'm not proud of, but I'm not always defined by that. I'm making good choices, and I do other things which I am proud of. But the other thing I would say, and I'm pleased you brought up the football example, is there's actually quite a lot of responsibility on organisations to manage their safeguarding properly. And I've just last week there were all those allegations about a very high profile, now deceased man.
Are we talking about Fulham? We are talking about the Fulham ladies team. Yeah, I think we'll leave it. Yeah, carry on.
So Fulham Football Club had a brilliant response where what they said was that at the time they became aware that there was the possibility for abuse to be happening. And so what they did was they put in place measures to make sure that all the people in their club were properly protected. It doesn't matter who might have caused the abuse. The football club was taking responsibility for protecting its members by making sure they had really good safeguarding in place.
And that's the ultimate safeguarding, right? They're not waiting for someone to come in and say this has happened. Exactly. They're thinking,
prevention. And there's all sorts of very straightforward, simple things that you can do, which mean that people don't have the opportunity to commit the crime, even if they might have done so in the past. So that's where I think, a lot of the conversations that I have with organisations when they're considering should we employ somebody or not, firstly, I say get to know the person. And that's why we do these really detailed disclosure statements, which are about the whole person. But I also say, understand, what the risks are, and understand and question, what are you doing already? Because it's not just going to be that person. It could be anybody in your organisation who commits the crime. How are you stopping that from happening? And they probably already have all sorts of measures in place.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And do you find people that have come out of prison, do they have a different outlook on things now? Do they bring more to the business? Do they bring stuff that? Do you know what I'm saying is, can businesses benefit from having? You're nodding, so I'm hoping the answer is yes. So if you can give me anything around that, you know what I'm trying to ask, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to quote James Timpson here. He's the new prisons minister, but for years, as the head of Timpson's shoe repairs and key cutting, he has been employing people from prison. He has training workshops in prisons to train people how to do the work, and about 10% of his workforce are people who've been in prison. And he's been very vocal about the loyalty, the longevity of their work with him, and what I don't like is the kind of, they'll be forever grateful if you give them a job. But the reality is that actually, if we're treating people right, not everybody is ready for it. Some people are in prison because they have a huge number of personal issues, whether that's drug-related, addiction issues, mental health issues. Not everybody is ready for work. And that's another part of the assessment that we do. There's no point in forcing somebody into a job if they're still in a complete mess and they need a lot of help in other areas. So I'm not trying to say that this is right for everybody, but there are lots of people who are ready for it. And when they're ready with the right support, then yes, they can make a real success of it.
And if companies want to get more involved and support that can you help with that? Can you help with them? What sort of questions should we be asking in an interview? What should we be looking for? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of the things that I've been talking to Tony and Rich about actually as well.
Yes.
Is about some additional training that we could offer to help companies to look at their recruitment process, their risk assessment, their safeguarding, and just it kind of falls under the inclusivity umbrella, really. So I know you do some training on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it's that inclusion bit is a big umbrella. So yeah, certainly there's support around for organisations who are thinking, oh, maybe this could be quite a good way to fill our skills gap. Help.
Absolutely. Love that. Yeah. Ruth, we always, time is running. Where did that go? It always runs away. I tend to end with a couple of personal questions for you, if you don't mind. And when I mean personal, you don't worry. What should I be reading? What should I be listening to? What's on your playlist?
Oh, prison related or in general?
Oh no, not necessarily. Let's get to know you a little bit.
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm a big fan of live music, so I'm always out and about. I live in Sheffield. I go to a lot of grassroots live music.
Nice.
On Spotify last year, Stormzy was my absolute fave from my Unwrapped. I like funk and soul music, and I love dancing, so I'll always be out dancing at the weekends if I can.
Fantastic. Which is probably going to answer my next question, my ending question, which regular listeners will know. What's the ultimate weekend look like for you then?
Oh yeah, well I can tell you because I try to do this as often as possible.
You were straight in there.
Yeah, I know it because so I'm really ridiculously evangelical about having moved to Sheffield, and I love it. It's where I belong.
Yep.
So it will be so a Friday, sort of finish early on a Friday. Head out and have a swim in the peaks and a walk, and then Saturday mornings I do park run, and then I'll do something in town because it's a nice cool city, or else I'll go out for another walk in the peaks, and then on Sundays I go to my favourite bar where there's always live music and people to chat to, have a glass of wine.
How good does that sound? I was going to pick up on
a combination of walking, dancing, swimming, running, and listening to music.
Sounds great. I'm a park runner myself, and I'm pushing for that. I've got my 100 t-shirt, and I think I'm up to something like 170, 180, something like that now. But I think the next t-shirt isn't till 250, which I always find very strange. Yeah. You think just do them every 100 and you make a killing.
Oh, well, I'm much newer to it than you because I used to live 10 miles away from my closest park run, and I couldn't justify driving somewhere to run 3 miles. But now I live a mile and a half away, so I walk there. So I've got my 25 coming up in a couple of weeks.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, fantastic. And I did cheat at some point. And what I mean by that is people are like, how can you cheat at parkrun? So if you do tail runner, or if you do, sometimes I've done it as a pacer, and then you get a volunteer and a bit double bubble. Yeah, a bit of a trick there. So fantastic. It's a bit hilly for a parkrun, isn't it, Sheffield? Sheffield's all up and down.
It really is, honestly. 3 laps, I do Sheffield Castles, and it's got Heartbreak Hill. So I 3 laps. I can run all the way up on the first lap, about 3/4 on the second, about halfway on the third. But it's really motivational, and everybody cheers you on.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic environment. We could talk about parkrun forever.
They do parkrun in some prisons as well, by the way. That's another podcast. Yeah.
Oh, of course. I should look into that. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us. It's been brilliant. It'd be remiss of me not to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can reach out to you, where they can learn more about you and more about the work that you do at doing what really matters. So over to you for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, just simply our website, really, dwrm.org.uk, and we're on socials at DWRM_CIC.
Thank you so much, Ruth. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us today. Feeling curious to learn more about how we help people remember stuff? Well, why not sign up for a free trial of our AI-powered bite-sized learning app, BentoBot? You can do that easily at bentobot.com. And you can catch up on interviews with all of our previous guests by subscribing to this pod via Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform. Until next time, take care.